Today we worked on several topics, started off with division, and I like to spend a little effort in explaining the mechanics of what we normally accept as routine calculations, particularly in division. Now, I know that we have access to calculators, and yes, we will probably do a lot of work on the calculator. However, go ahead and stop and think a little bit about what it means to do division in this what we call the classic long division form. This was the problem we had on the warm up, and I wanted to use a little slightly different problem, and mainly because I wanted a divisor value that was smaller, and I think you'll see why in a minute. So I used the example of I had 698 items, and I think I used onions, and I want to put them in groups of 3, or I want to bag them and put only 3 in a bag. You can say, well, that's not very many onions. I agree with you. But the point is, what you have to say to yourself is, if you were really doing this and you had 698 onions and you had to put them in bags and put 3 in each bag, and someone said, hey, how many bags do you need? Well, you're going to say, well, I think I'm going to need at least 200 bags. Why? Because, 200 bags times 3 onions would be 600. You don't need 300 bags. No, that'd be too many. You don't need 100 bags. No, that wouldn't be enough. So you get those bagged and you realize you have some left. And you ask yourself, well, I have 98 of these things left. How many bags do I need? You need 4 bags? No, that won't be enough. Well, I need 30 bags. 40 bags is too many, right? 40 bags times 3 would be 120 bags. So 30 times 3 would be 90. Get down to this, you have 8 left. How many bags do you need? Well, I need 2. And then I'm going to fill that 2 bags with 6, and I'll have 2 left over, and I'll call that my remainder. So the idea here is that when you're doing this, what you're really saying to yourself is, as you kind of work through this thing one digit at a time here in your dividend, say to yourself, 3 will go into 6 2 times. And when you do that, remember, this is really saying to yourself that this first value in my quotient is going to be in the hundreds place. It's going to be 200, and corresponds to the thought process we went through over there. Now, then we went ahead and we did this first problem, and it winds up being a fairly straightforward problem because we had a remainder of 0. And so if we do it with the traditional long division, we would say, will 18 go into 6? Said differently now, think about this. If I had just 6 items, could I make a group of 18? That's the way we normally think about this. But think a little further and say to yourself, what I'm asking myself here is there going to be a hundreds place in the quotient? Is there going to be a number in the hundreds place in the quotient? The smallest number that could be there other than 0 would be 1. So think what would happen if you had 1 here and nothing else. You'd have 100. Well, 100 times 18 would be 1800. And you only are dealing with 648. So you can tell from that thought process that it's got to be a 0 here. And then you move over and you say, well, this now is 64, and it's actually, 64. And I can say, well, I can go 18 into 64 3 times, and then you come down. Now, I tried to illustrate this in this point, and I said, well, look, if I'm starting off here, and I say, can there be a hundreds place in my quotient? No, they can't. So then I dropped, and I said, well, pick 600 and work off of just 600 as your number, meaning you've decided that the quotient cannot contain a hundreds place value, but it can contain some tens. So you say, well, 30 times 18 will give me the 540, which is what this number represents. Do your subtraction, and you have 60 left. Combine that with the 40 and the 8, and you wind up with 108, which represents this. And then you say, with 108 divided by 18 is 6, and you sum this up and you get 36 as your quotient. If we think of it purely as repeated subtraction, we'd be here a long time. 648 minus 18, 630 minus 18, and so forth. And we would eventually do this subtraction a total of 36 times, and then we would have used up all 648 of these items. Now, this one, we said, let's use our calculator on it. We did it manually, And what we received manually was this answer. We had 82 and a remainder of 45. Now, when we put that in our calculator, and I'll try to repeat that calculation for you here, get it where you can see it. So I'm going to say 5,211 divided by 63, and we get this answer. We get 82 and what looks like, eventually you'll understand what this means. It looks like it's a repeating decimal string. It looks like it's 714285, and then this 714285 is going to repeat. And you say, well, wait a minute now. My answer in Math Excel needs for me to show it the remainder value. Using the calculator, I've lost the fact that the remainder was actually 45 here. When we did the calculation, we got a remainder of 45. So how can I get from here back to there? If you will do this, if you will first of all subtract the whole number part and leave behind the decimal part, minus 82. And that leaves behind just that decimal part. Then if you will hit second fraction decimal, enter, you get 5/7. Now you've got to stop and think for a second, because 5/7 is the way the calculator is presenting to us this relationship, 5/7. Now what is this? This says I had 45 left and I was still trying to divide by 63, so we write it in this form. Now the calculator said that's fine, except I can simplify this fraction, and we're going to learn about simplifying fractions in the next chapters. However, all they did was it said divide by 9, and I get 5/7 is an equivalent to 45 over 63. Why is that even an issue? Because to determine that the value of the remainder is 45, you will have to convert, think now, you'll have to convert the divisor from 7 back to 63. Multiply times 9, and you stumble upon the fact that, the remainder must have been 45. So the answer to this problem, as far as Math Excel would be concerned, would be 82 with a remainder of 45. Now, if you had to, it wouldn't hurt you just to have to do this manually, just to determine what the value of the remainder is. The next one is a couple of questions about rounding, and just in a nutshell, the rules for rounding say that you look at the digit that you're rounding to, and if the value to the immediate right of that digit is 5 or more, you round it up. If it's less than 5, you kind of expect leave it alone, is the way I would refer to it. Estimate the sum of first rounding to the nearest 10. All right, so 48 rounded to the nearest 10 is 50. 63 rounded is 60. 21 is 20. 37 is 40. Do you see how I got all those numbers? 8 says make that a 5. 3 says leave that alone. 1 says leave that alone. 7 says leave that alone. I add these together and I get what? 11, 13, 170. If the estimate's 180, I don't think so. If the estimate's 160, if the estimate's 140, is that okay? So, they say, does the estimate give you reason to doubt the state, reason to doubt. So, okay, no. It's an estimate of 170, so I don't have any reason to doubt. Makes sense. Somebody runs 23 miles a day. How many miles does this person run in 48 days? Round that to 20. Round that to 50. And we get 1,000 miles in the number of days. Now that's not an exact answer, so just be careful with Math Excel. When it asks you for an estimate, it will tell you the rounding approach. Now, if you will recall when we talked about addition and subtraction, well, let me show you a way to envision this kind of equational problem. If you had an equation that looked something like this, I'm making this up now, 5x equals 15, then you could think in terms of your multiplication division facts that there is 5 times something that's 15. Oh, it's 3. And therefore, 15 divided by 3 is 5, and 15 divided by 5 is 3. So what does that have to do with this kind of problem? In this case, what would I do? I would divide by 5, divide by 5, and I would get that x is 3. So when you have a multiplication equation, you use division. If we had a division equation where we had something like 5 divided by x equals 75, then the question then is, what value will solve this? And you'll have to multiply to figure this out. And I'll kind of leave this one with you to see if you can figure that one out. This one is a simple subtraction. They simply want me to subtract 323 from 845. 5 minus 3 is 2. 4 minus 2 is 2. 8 minus 3 is 5. So what do we get? 4 minus 2 is 2. So 5, I think it's this number here, isn't it? C. Let's see, is it that C? It is. And this one, oh, here we go. 4 times x is 40. What do I do here? Oh, divide by 4. Why? Because if you divide by 4 on both sides, why do you use both sides? Because this is a balancing point. If you take an action on this side, you must also take the same action on the other. We're trying to make a number sentence that's true, and the way you maintain the trueness is if you take an action over here, you take the same action over here. 4 divided by 4 is 1, so that leaves me with an x here. 40 divided by 4 is 10, and you probably already knew the answer. That was going to be 10. Okay. Oh. Now, these problems, I'm going to just tell you right away, you're going to see problems like this again. And what we have to do is we have to say we start off with a certain amount of money, and we do some subtraction. We subtract. How much do we subtract? We're going to subtract, let's see, we're going to subtract 49, 36, and 125. Now, how much is that in total? I'm just going to add those together here. 49 plus 36 plus 125. Might help you turn it on. So 49 plus 36 plus 125 is 210. So from my 751, I'm going to subtract 210. 1 minus 0 is 1, 5 minus 1 is 4, 7 minus 2 is 5, and then I added 148. So I take that 751, the 751 minus the 210 plus the 148, and it says I have 689. And looks like it's that answer there. Person can type 64 in 1 minute. How many can they type in 55 minutes? If I can type 64 in 1 minute, and you want me to go for 55 minutes, then there's my problem. And we can use our calculator, right? So it's got 64 times 55 and 3,520. That was pretty easy. If it bothers you, we'll just do it this way. 0, 2, 5, 3, and we get the same answer. Good enough. What about this one? Exponential notation. What does that mean? It means that we're going to have some value that we refer to as a base raised to a certain power that's referred to as an exponent. It simply means take this base and multiply it times itself, the number of times called for by the exponent. So this says take 8 and multiply it times itself 3 times. 8 multiplied times itself 3 times. The base is 8, the exponent is 3. So let's look at these. The base here is 3 and the exponent's 8. This answer would look like this. It would look like 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. If I got 8 of them, 2, 4, about 8. See the difference? This would be simply 8 to itself. It's 8. This one is 3 times 8. Don't get confused. This does not mean 8 times 3 or 3 times 8. It means 8 times itself 3 times. Estimate. You ready? Go to the bank to cash 3 checks. The checks are, I'm going to call this one 40. I'm going to call this one 165. I'll just do it down here. And I'm going to call this one 80. And so, what do we get here? We get 5, 285. Does that, yeah, that seems right. Yep, that seems right. Estimate at 285, and so I think the answer they concluded over here in the back is yes. Yes. Oh no, this is one where we have to use the order of operations. We do the work inside the parentheses, then we do any exponents. If we had any, we multiply and divide in order, and then we add and subtract. So look at this. We've got some work to do inside of these grouping symbols. So here's what we would do. We would say 8 times 5 plus 18, which is divided by 8 minus, and finally, what's that? 5. So I did that calculation. I'm not finished yet. 8 times 5 plus 18 is being divided by 8 minus 5 is 3. We'll get it in a minute. 8 times 5 plus, what's 18 divided by 3? 6. Multiply first, 40. So the answer should be, answer choice should be C on that one. And whoa! Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't even read it. Yeah, 46. Yeah. Okay, easy. Yeah, boy, this were a test, and I did that. Would I ever kick myself? Would I ever kick myself? I just was in a hurry, and I didn't really read it carefully. I got 46. I marked 45, and was wrong when I knew the answer was 46. So when you have the test at the end of the semester, which will be an on-paper test, be careful. Be careful. And I think that's all I'm going to talk about today.